You think you know the Beatles, right? Four guys from Liverpool, your parents' favorite records, and the soundtrack to every road trip. But the moment you step off the surface, things get very strange. We're talking about secret societies supposedly creating the band from scratch. Hidden messages when you play their songs backward. Paul McCartney dying in a car crash and getting replaced by a look-alike. Some people even claim that everyone except Paul died, or that the Beatles never really existed at all. Today, we're diving into the craziest conspiracy theories about the Beatles. Everything from the Illuminati using them for mind control to the famous Paul is dead clues that fans say are hidden in their album covers. But a quick disclaimer that these are just conspiracy theories and not facts, usually completely debunked. But they're weirdly fascinating, and some of them are honestly pretty creative in how bizarre they get. So let's get into it. To understand why Beatles conspiracies even exist, you have to remember just how massive they were. In the 1960s, the Beatles basically took over the world. They changed fashion, music, youth culture, even the way people wore their hair. So when something gets that huge, people naturally start asking, what if there's more to this? And that's where things get interesting. One of the wildest theories out there? The Illuminati created the Beatles. This idea comes from a book called Committee of 300, written by a former MI6 officer named John Coleman. According to his theory, a British think tank called Tavistock essentially created the Beatles to destroy American youth through drugs and negative messaging. But it goes even deeper than that. According to conspiracy theorists, the Beatles were meant to bring forth a slave populace and remove Christianity, replacing it with the New Age movement. The cool anti-establishment Beatles, just puppets to the Illuminati. Believers point to photos where Paul holds up what looks like 666, and John flashes the devil horns. They also point to things the Beatles actually said. Paul once stated, "Christianity doesn't fit in with my life." John famously said, "Christianity will go. It will vanish and shrink." I need argue about that. I'm right and will be proved right. Then there are the album details that conspiracy theorists love to dig into. In 1988, the Beatles released a compilation called Past Masters. Now here's where it gets interesting. Past Master is actually a Masonic term for the former worshipful master of a Masonic lodge. And the album contains exactly 33 songs. Apparently, the number 33 is super important among Masons and in the occult. Even the song meanings get completely twisted. Lucy in the Sky supposedly refers to Lucifer. Across the Universe is really about demonic possession according to these theories. When John sings Jai Guru Diva, they claim he's actually saying all hail to the divas, which are essentially demons that Luciferian Satanists claim possess them when committing atrocities. Some believers even say the Beatles could never have reached their level of fame without a little help from some very dark forces. Is there actual solid evidence for any of this? No. But this theory sets the tone perfectly for Beatles' conspiracy world. Nothing is random. Every lyric, every hand gesture, every album detail is supposedly there for a reason, and it's all up for interpretation. And that brings us to the most famous Beatles conspiracy of all time. Paul is dead. This theory is so popular that it's basically folklore now. The story goes like this. Sometime in late 1966, Paul McCartney died in a car accident after a heated argument with the band. He was supposedly decapitated in the crash. Rather than tell the world and risk mass hysteria, the powers that be secretly replaced him with a look-alike named William Campbell. According to the conspiracy, William won a secret look-alike contest, got intensive training to copy Paul's voice, mannerisms, and songwriting style, and then just stepped into his life. Sounds ridiculous, right? But fans started finding clues everywhere. On the White Album, people claimed that if you play parts of Revolution 9 backwards, you hear, "Turn me on, dead man." In I'm So Tired, reversed audio is interpreted as Paul is a dead man, miss him, miss him, miss him. In Strawberry Fields Forever, some swear John says, "I buried Paul near the end." Others argue he's really saying cranberry sauce, which is objectively less dramatic. Then there's the visual evidence, and honestly, this is where conspiracy fans really start having fun. The Abbey Road cover is the crown jewel of the theory, the moment everyone points to first. According to believers, the entire scene is meant to mimic a funeral procession. John leads the group dressed in white, supposedly symbolizing a priest or heavenly figure. Behind him is Ringo, wearing all black like an undertaker. Paul comes next, out of step with the others, barefoot and holding a cigarette in his right hand, even though he was famously left-handed. To theorists, he's the corpse. And bringing up the rear is George in denim, representing the gravedigger. Even the tiny details get folded into the narrative. The Volkswagen parked in the background, for example, has a license plate reading 28IF, which some claim hints that Paul would have been 28 if he were still alive. On Sgt. Pepper's, theorists say the entire scene is like a burial tableau. A floral bass guitar missing a string supposedly symbolizes the missing Beatle. Over Paul's head, a hand hovers like the gesture of blessing the dead. He holds a black woodwind instrument instead of brass, like the others. There's even a red glove on the cover. Some people insist represents a blood-stained driving glove. Inside the sleeve art, Paul wears what looks like an OPP or OPD patch, which conspiracy theorists reinterpret as officially pronounced dead. On the back cover, he's the only one facing away. And on the darker Yesterday and Today butcher cover, people see raw meat and dismembered dolls as a gruesome nod to his supposed fate. Of course, Paul McCartney is very much alive and has talked about this theory multiple times. But that hasn't stopped the clues from being collected, cataloged, and reinterpreted for decades. Then you get the reverse version of the theory: everyone died except Paul. In one student-written twist, Ringo Starr supposedly died first in 1963, George in 1964, and John in 1966, with each death hidden through visual hints on album covers and lyrical references. It's like the fandom collectively said, okay, what if we just invert it? And if that's not wild enough, some people go even further and claim the Beatles never existed at all. According to this idea, John, Paul, George, and Ringo were basically roles played by multiple actors and doubles over the years. Height changes, shifting facial features, different jawlines, new mannerisms, all chalked up as evidence that we've been watching a rotating cast under the same four names. Not all conspiracies are dark, though. Some are more playful, like the idea that the Beatles secretly recorded extra songs and intentionally hid them away to release if they ever needed fast cash. Back in the 70s, a teen claimed to have a bootleg of unreleased Beatles tracks with titles like Left is Right and Right is Wrong, Deck Chair, and Colliding Circles. It eventually turned out to be a hoax, but for a while, fans were buzzing about this secret emergency album fund, and then we swing right back into the deep end. One of the most disturbing and completely baseless theories is the claim that horror author Stephen King was somehow involved in the murder of John Lennon, supposedly working with the US government. Let's be crystal clear here, there is no credible evidence for this. John Lennon was murdered by Mark David Chapman, who confessed and was convicted. The Stephen King theory comes from a fringe conspiracist who tried to tie together look-alike photos, political tension, and pure speculation. It's not supported by facts, and repeating it as truth would be irresponsible and defamatory. What it does show, though, is just how intense Beatles mythology has become. When a band becomes larger than life, people start writing alternate realities for them. Some playful, some eerie, some outright harmful. So honestly, all of these theories are a good reminder to keep your critical thinking on. You don't have to believe any of them to find them interesting. Some of them are just so out there that you can't help but go, how did anyone even come up with this? I'm curious though, which Beatles conspiracy do you find the most fascinating? Not because you think it's true, but because the idea itself is just wild. Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of the Beatles conspiracies, you can like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. There are plenty more pop culture rabbit holes we're planning to dig into.